Mamawatali presents Strong Women, Strong Men series. Today's topic, the psychology of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence, its impact on seniors and people with disabilities. Panelist Joanne Robinson, President, FLOW's Senior Health and Care Programs Network, Inc. Melissa Rowe, MSW, social worker and certified life coach. Moderator Jacqueline Lawrence, diversity strategist and author. Mamawatali is an Ottawa-based nonprofit organization with an international reach.
Mamawatali means in the absence of a mother, and it comes from the Bantu language of Luganda. And it was born after my mom passed away. Now, the organization is really at the core to serve Black women that have suffered personal loss, whether it is through loss of a loved one, but most especially because of domestic or what is sometimes referred to as intimate partner violence. When women go through violence of any kind, women just need somewhere to turn and talk to somebody, either in search of resources or just somebody to listen and validate what they're going through as they try to recover and rebuild their lives.
Mamawatali was founded to support survivors of gender-based violence and to create awareness of the challenges women continue to face.
We are doing advocacy work at all levels of government, from municipal, provincial, to national level, because women's rights essentially are human rights. And at the core of the human rights is the equality of both men and women.
Founded by Susan Namulindwa, Mamawatali has successfully undertaken several projects nationally and internationally, including the creation of a library in Uganda.
When I was a little girl, I loved to read. I remember being in a boarding school and splitting novels with my friends so that we could read. So I used this opportunity of being in Ottawa to collect books from my children's school boards, and with the help of lottery and volunteers, we transported those books to Luweero and set up a community library. We were able to distribute books to neighboring schools so that they could use them to elevate the education in the area. We have also done community microcredits for women in Luweero still and in Uganda in general. And we also were able to get school fees for girls. These are girls that will be high achievers for secondary school who would not have gone to school otherwise. So those are some of the things we have done in the past. Right now, our target market is right here in Canada mostly. Black women, new immigrant women that have been affected by domestic violence, intimate partner violence, or any kind of loss. So we are setting up community support circles. So we are encouraging women to get in touch and find just some either professional help or women that have also gone through what you're going through to support you. Sometimes it's just a shoulder to lean on, or somebody to say, you know what, I've made it. If I made it, you can make it. So we are really trying not to talk about being victims. We are talking about overcoming.
The vision of Mamawatali is to give voice to the lives of Black women in all its dimensions.
Well, most of us have seen or witnessed a situation that we know is wrong. We know somebody who is going through some kind of abuse, some woman who needs intervention, but sometimes we don't know how to do it. So we want to put volunteer resources together so that people know how they can help in a way that is helpful for the family and helpful for the woman or the women that are going through it, so they can move forward with their children. We are putting together resources for parenting. How do you parent? How do we parent boys and girls to make sure that the boys know that they don't have to be abusive? This is not a power struggle, that they can have healthy relationships. We need to emphasize the fact that when a girl or a woman says no, that no means no. And there is no reason why as a society or as a community we should turn around and blame the victims after they have been abused. So currently we are holding a series of conversations. So these are weekly conversations around issues that affect women. I want to call strong men out there, strong women out there, but especially strong men. This work is not about women versus men. We need to hear the male voices. There is a lot of good, strong men out there that fight day and night for their families, that go out every day to protect their families. We need to hear your voices. We need to hear you add your voices to this work because, the family is the core foundation of our community. So if we have broken families, we are going to have a broken community. So a family is the nucleus of the community. So if we build strong families, we will build a strong community. Jump in and let us do this work together.
Welcome to Mamawatali's Strong Women's Strong Men series and today's discussion on navigating relationships between African, Black, and African Caribbean seniors and their Canadian children. My name is Jacqueline Lawrence, and I'll be your moderator for this session. I'm a diversity strategist by day, a poet by night, and as the Diversity and Equity Coordinator for the Ottawa Carleton District School Board, I work with system leaders to identify and address systemic and structural barriers that impact student and staff success and well-being. As a published poet and author, I enjoy the journey to dance with curiosity, vulnerability, and paradox to mine possibilities and sacred wisdom. I am also a facilitator of the International Black Summit and one of your co-hosts and producers on CHU's Black on Black. My role today is to guide the conversation with our panelists and with our participants. I now invite Talissa Singh McKay to do the land acknowledgement.
We gather this afternoon on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We acknowledge that they lived here before us and keep living here now. Reconnaître le terrain sur lequel nous vivons est une invitation pour nous à reconnaître l'histoire de la Terre, des gens et de la connectivité pour donner un sens à ces connexions. By learning where we live, we honor the cultures and practices of people of this land and continue to be aware of and participate in the healing process of colonization and intergenerational trauma. As a woman born in this country to immigrant parents, myself and my family are guests. Je vous appelle à reconnaître que vous êtes également des invités, des gardiens aussi. As an organization that advocates for the support of Black women and families who experience personal loss, all forms of intimate and gender violence and harassment through a historically patriarchal and racist system, we recognize the myriad hardships faced by Indigenous people. Nous nous reconnaissons comme des personnes de couleur également opprimées, que les ancêtres des peuples autochtones ont été dépossédés, se sont fait arracher leurs enfants et leur culture a été dépouillée, que les esprits de votre peuple apportent la force d'avancer tout au long du chemin vers l'émancipation. May the spirits of your people bring forth the strength to move forward throughout the journey to emancipation. The patriarchal systems in place have damaged all of us, our families, our friends, and our personal environments. Nous nous voyons à travers les yeux, nous nous embrassons et nous agissons. Nous ne sommes pas des spectateurs. We are not bystanders. As we celebrate the UN Decade for People of African Descent, let us remember our ancestors, those who were enslaved, the mothers and their children who were raped and continued to be sold into slavery. May their spirits give us strength to uplift our voices as we continue their journey to freedom and equity. Alors que nous célébrons la décennie des Nations Unies pour les personnes d'ascendance africaine, souvenons-nous de nos ancêtres, de ceux qui ont été réduits en esclavage, des mères et de leurs enfants qui ont violé et ont continué d'être vendus comme esclaves. Puis, leur esprit nous donnait la force de lever nos voix, que nous poursuivons leur chemin de la liberté et l'équité. Thank you, et je vous remercie.
Long before there was the term social distancing, there was the term social isolation to describe the lives of many who choose to migrate from other countries to live in Canada. It is something that many people do not talk about. Statistics Canada notes that social isolation occurs when someone has infrequent and or poor quality contact with other people. A person who's socially isolated typically has few social contacts or social roles and few or no mutually rewarding relationships. During this session, as I said at the beginning, we're going to explore navigating relationships between ABC seniors and their Canadian children. This will include unpacking living between two or more cultures in one home, exploring the psychological impact of social isolation, including gender-based violence, intimacy partner violence, and violence against seniors, and distinguishing some of the lessons and wisdom as we navigate COVID-19. Today, we will explore these areas with our panelists, Melissa Rowe and Joanne Robinson. Let me take a moment just to introduce you to the amazing panelists that we have here this afternoon. Melissa Rowe holds a master's degree in social work and is a certified life coach who supports women in supporting themselves and recognizing their strength, power, and greatness from within. She traveled extensively in East, Central, Southern, and West Africa, and spent an extended period as an international gender and diversity specialist, coordinating gender-focused development programs in Gabon, Botswana, and establishing a multipurpose center for women and girls in Lusaka, Zambia. Melissa has a strong commitment in creating a welcoming, inclusive, and respectful space that allows for individuals to embrace change and take action. And our second panelist, Joanne Robinson, is an active member of many community organizations. I would say quite a lot, Joanne. Although she enjoys community work, she also recognizes it is not just about the community organizations, but the community at large. With that in mind, she expanded her collaborations and volunteerism within mainstream organizations as well as within the National Capital Region. Joanne looks for ways in which to enhance programs within the community. She does this through collaborative efforts with other associations and or community members. Joanne is also the president of Flow Seniors Health and Care Programs Network Incorporated, which is dedicated to promoting the independence and well-being of older adults in Ottawa region through the provision of information as well as various programs and services. Let us begin our conversation by just having you share with us, actually, let me start it this way. I often think that the decision to leave the only home you have known, to cross a border for hours or days, or to live in another country that is unknown or unfamiliar, oftentimes with one or no family or friends in close proximity, is an act of bravery. I know that many would not characterize this decision as brave. They would most likely say that their decision was driven by necessity, not choice, so that they could make a better life for their families. As we begin our conversations around living between two cultures, Melissa, can you describe the differences in culture you noticed and or had to adjust to upon arriving in Canada?
I would agree that to both statements that you made in terms of it is the challenges of leaving home and family and the known for the unknown. And also the fact that one of the reasons I left was to create a better life for myself and my extended family back home. With that said, arriving in Ottawa in 1970, in the middle of the FLQ crisis, for those of us who are old enough to know what the FLQ crisis was, it was traumatic, to say the least, because I knew no one in Ottawa. I came to work with a family, a British family, and of whom I had no conversation, I had no contact. So that was my first introduction to Ottawa. And then I was, my new home was about 30 miles outside of Ottawa to a place called Shirley's Bay. Isolation, we could call that social and cultural isolation, because it was in a culture that I was not familiar with as a group of family, British family. And that year we had the second culture shock was the weather, the cold. Even in October, for me, that felt like winter until I really found out what winter was later with the massive amount of snow. So that isolation lasted for about a year, because I signed a contract to be in that position for a year. So that was social isolation, but also culture shock, because I'm coming from a culture and entering into a different culture and needing to adjust to my new home.
What were some of those cultural pieces? I mean, the weather for sure, and the climate, both politically and socially, was also very steep. But what were some of the more nuanced cultural pieces that you had to get used to as well?
One was having to live in the same space as the family with whom I was working, and not having complete privacy. Mm-hmm. Because children are curious and always wanting to know what is going on in my room. Mm-hmm. So the lack of space, lack of privacy, and there was also the lack of connection between myself as the worker and the family. Mm-hmm. Not being a part of the family, but being someone who is the worker and the caregiver. Mm-hmm. and playing that role, and not being able to leave the space and meet other people similar to me, coming from the similar culture. Mm-hmm. of my own, because it was in a space where I was not able to get out and move around because of the location, because of the environment. Mm-hmm.
I heard you say privacy, but am I also hearing you talk about boundaries as well? Different ways of seeing boundaries?
Yeah. There's a set of boundaries, because if you have your room and you can't stop people from coming in, then that, mm-hmm. That's crossing boundaries, and that you are isolated. And okay, a typical example would be an example is many of us who came up as domestic workers were provided training in before we came to work in these homes. So we always in Jamaica, we cook with spices. So in the morning after I arrived, I was introduced to the kitchen, and I was told this is what it is for dinner this today. It was a roast, and we use a little bit of salt and pepper. And I was ready to spice, because my mother usually you cut up the spice and you chunk a hole in it and you stuff the spices in it. So when you're eating that meat, it has spice, and here I am, I'm thinking, oh Lord, and by the way, we eat our meat our meat rare. So for me, that it's another shock, because then I have to figure out, okay, so what am I gonna eat? Because I'm not gonna eat that. So I have to find ways to adjust to that as well, and just yeah.
Welcome to Canada, right?
Welcome to Canada, and welcome to this.
Joanne, your story is a little bit on the other side, where you were the child of immigrant parents. So can you describe what cultural differences you noticed between your household and, say, that of your friends or other children in your neighborhood?
So my sister and I spend the early part of our years, although born here, but we spend the early part of our years in in Jamaica. So coming back to Canada and just starting school, some of the stuff that we noticed were the children were dressed differently. Our hair was well combed. We were well dressed, uniform like what my sister was used to in Jamaica. And the children could not understand why we were so well dressed and well groomed. Being the two only Black children in the school, we fight every day going to school. We fought every day coming home because the other children didn't feel that we should be so well dressed, so well put together. As we got to know some of the students, we used to bring them home for lunch because my mother always brought us home for lunch. We had a hot meal, whereas they had sandwiches. So they found this a very novel idea. And so everybody wanted to come to our house for lunch. Some parents weren't so happy about that, but my mother had the door open for anybody that wanted to come, and we brought them home. So a lot of the differences I found is the way in which we dressed, the way in which we respected our parents and spoke to our parents. We addressed our parents as mom and dad, not Jack and Jill, and that type of thing. The students coming to our home learned a different way in which to be raised. A lot of them changed a lot of their mannerisms, I found, going forward in the way in which they dressed their parents, the way they looked at their clothing. We also had, when we went to school, we already knew half the stuff that they were teaching because learning begins at home. So we were looked upon as if we didn't know, we were behind, but in fact, we were bored. So it's quite a big difference. I think that if we were actually raised here, that early part, it might not have been so bad. But being raised in Jamaica to come back to school, there's a big difference in the cultures.
It's interesting when you were just saying in terms of you were ahead, but you were still considered to be behind. I heard a student once describe that the expectation is that I live into a stereotype. Did you feel that? Did you feel that to some degree?
Oh, very much so. Because, as so-called Black children, you're not supposed to be smart. You're not supposed to know all the things that we already knew going to school. And who are you to be coming well-equipped to school? We need to put you in the back of the class so that you can't outshine any of the other children in the class. My sister and I ended up being separated. They separated us, sent her to a different school than I was at. What they didn't realize is that I was the instigator, but that was okay.
Can you share, are there any differences that you notice between your mom and your friends' parents in terms of ways of being?
Well, my parents were very strict, more so my dad than my mother, but they made sure that we always were escorted to school until we're accustomed to. I found a lot of people walking along the road, nobody with them, and you kind of wonder, well, where are the parents? Some of the other parents didn't have a problem with their children calling them by their first name. That did not occur in our house. We went to school in one set of clothes, and we had to change when we came home before we went outside. So when my friends were outside in the same clothes that they wore to school, I'm saying, well, what's going on here? Mom says, no, we don't do that.
You had your distinction, school clothes, church clothes.
Exactly. And, you shine your shoes, you get ready for church, that type of thing. And I found that a lot of the parents, even when we were going to Sunday school, it wasn't a big deal what they had on. But for my parents, no. You have your Sunday school stuff on, your shoes have to be shined and ready to go from the night before.
It's so fascinating. I mean, these things seem so very simple, but they speak volumes in terms of perception.
That's right.
I want to go back a little bit to the conversation that Melissa rose about culture shock. And I wonder if you could speak if you could both speak about the stress of migration, the unknown. There is excitement about the unknown, but there's also some stresses that come with the unknown and social isolation. So, Melissa, what did you experience and how did you manage the stresses that came with both your social and cultural isolation? And Joanne, if you could speak a little bit about how your parents may have navigated, or since you also came back to Canada, how you learned to navigate and manage the stresses that showed up. So Melissa, what showed up for you in your experience, your social and cultural isolation, and how did you manage that?
I think I will speak to the management first in terms of the early years, like the first year. I didn't feel like I had much of a choice because I didn't know anyone. I would have a day off, but didn't know anyone, so I would go into the downtown Ottawa with the husband, and I would walk up and down the street, Bank Street, up and down until he was ready to go home again. I basically call it release from jail and then go back, because that time I didn't have to respond to anyone. But there wasn't that diversity in terms of people who I saw when I was out, and that kind of shocked me. I would get on the bus, and I would be sitting in some place, and number one, no one would sit beside me if there was. Maybe it's a story that I told myself, but that's what I felt, that no one wanted to sit beside me, and I was wondering, well, what's wrong with me? Do I smell or something? But and nobody talked to me. That was the worst piece. It's this silence of people don't speak to you unless they know you. And for us, from the culture from where I was coming, I mean, we're constantly talking. Even when you line up for the bus, you're supporting each other and getting on the bus on the line, and you're talking all the time. Like wagwan, like to find something to talk about. So that was very different for me as well. And also this thing about when you get on the bus in Jamaica, if there's an elderly person that comes on the bus, you get up and give them your seat. You don't sit there. And so for me, that as well was the respect for the elderly, and the name called first name type thing, all of that. But yeah, so there was a lot. And then later on, what I did was I got to meet other women who were going through having the similar experience, and so we would get together.
How did you meet? Because if you were in the situation for a year where you were with the family, how did you then connect with the other workers?
There was one other woman who was working for doing the same work with a Jamaican family. And I can't remember how we met, but we met.
Okay.
And maybe at some event or something, I can't remember, but we met and we connected. And so on my day off, I would go to her place, because her family was very open and receptive as well. I mean, everybody knows the Downies in Ottawa. The Downies are were at that time, very known in the community, and I think all of this still do. But I connected with this one person, and we became close, and we spent more time together. And by the time we were both out of that environment, we were in another environment where we shared space. We had this 1-bedroom apartment that we rented on Bank Street with green floors and not a big tub, but no shower, that kind of thing. But it was our first apartment, and we were just happy to be in that space and not be in the other space that we had been in. And so that became a different part of my journey, because then I started to meet other people and get involved in other issues in the community.
So you kind of moved from the social isolation to kind of a friendship, then to a broader community.
That's right.
Okay, wonderful, great. Joanne, how did your parents navigate migration stress? Or did you see them at all having any kind of challenges to navigate?
Well, my mother always told us when she first came, there was about 6 of them that came at the same time. So although they were in different people's homes on Thursday, they all seemed to be off on Thursday. They all found the Y and they all met there. And that relieved some of the stressors. They also were able to share with each other all the issues that they were facing or not, because some of them had good families, some not so good. And because she came before my dad, she was able to establish that foundation. So when my dad came, although he faced a different set of problems being a black man in Ottawa, he was able to navigate a little bit easier because he already had the foundation that my mom said. Mm-hmm. For us coming back and going to school, I hated school because you fought going and you fought coming back. And my dad's motto was, as long as you win, don't worry.
What triggered these fights?
Because we were well dressed. Because at that time when I was younger, I had a lot of hair, and my mother always had the ribbons in the hair or the ponytail fasteners or whatever the case may be, and it matched whatever I had on. And the children did not feel that I should be dressed like that. Now, children learn from their parents. You know, little children have none of those biases. They learn from their parents. So going to school, we always met up on the same set and the same problem. And my sister and I fought going to school and we fought coming home. So it made it very difficult when you're trying to explain to your parent that this is not the way you really want to live. And we wanted to go back to Jamaica to our grandmother. And my dad was not having that. So we had to adjust. But I watched my parents adjust and I figure, well, I don't have a choice. So we adjusted.
So when you say adjust, what do you mean?
So in terms of heading to school, the name calling would be there and all that type of thing. And we would just keep on going. When I was first starting off in school, the name started, the fist came out, and I was ready. Whereas when you ignore all the jabs, they tend to stop after a time because it's no longer fun. It was like a game to them. You know, let's bother them all the time. And then when we stop reacting, they then decide to start getting to know us as people.
Mm-hmm. And you were different, so you were a target because you're also different as well.
Oh, very much so.
I want to go back to something you said, because I think this is another stressor that's not often talked about. You said that your mom came first and then your dad came afterwards.
Yes.
That kind of split at some point for the family. Were you aware of any stresses that were being caused because of that split, or that, you know, the work to get the family back together? Were you aware of any stresses that came because of that?
Well, I wasn't thought of then, so I don't know. I can only tell you what she told me.
No, that'd be good. Would love to hear what she told you.
So she said this, one of the stresses for her was coming and having to deal with the negativity of the people on the street. She had a good family that she started off with. Some of the people that she came with, not so much. But knowing that on Thursdays, she was going to see some of her friends, helped her to get through that week. Because when she was on the street, she'd be called names as well. You know, people are very crude. They're still crude now, so I shouldn't say back then, but and the name she was called and the way she was treated in the grocery stores, what have you, even trying to find a place to live after she left her family was difficult because people didn't want to rent to them. So quite often you have a bunch of ladies renting a spot together, and they were each other's supports.
It's so interesting. The more things change, the more they stay the same in
That's
some
right.
ways.
That's right.
And yet it's how do you keep track and still be mindful that there is an adaptation and that you can move through this as well. I wonder, another aspect of stress, I think, that's often not talked about or that's not distinguished is the sense that many families, when they made the decision to migrate, there was still that desire or that dream to return home someday. And for many of them, it was maybe thinking about, you know, they'll take care of their family and then they may return home during retirement. And some people have done that, but for many people, that's not the reason, or that has not occurred. And there are many reasons for that. I mean, all their family may now be here. Back home, family and friends may have also migrated or passed away. The country or the community has changed in significant ways that they either don't know anybody, don't recognize anybody, all of those things. And there may also be financial things as well that may have occurred in the space. I'd like both of you to just share, how does this deferred dream, if you will, show up and impact families where there are two or more cultures living under the same roof? And how does that show itself in the relationships that may be in the home? Who would like to take it?
When you say two
or more cultures. So for example, it may be that, you know, you have the parents, you may have the child who is born in Canada, you may have, you know, a child who may have a spouse from another culture, all of those things. I mean, so two or more cultures may be cohabitating under one roof.
Yeah, Joanne, you want to take that one?
Okay.
I went to the elder first, Joanne, and she turned it back to you.
Okay. Well, I know that my dad always wanted to move back to Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to come here, do what he had to get done, and go back home. My father went from Jamaica to England to here. It was his hope to get my mother to come to England, not necessarily for him to come here. Mm-hmm. My mother, once she had children and grandchildren, had she wanted no part of that. Mm-hmm. She wanted to stay here to be with the family. And he said, okay, we'll stay. But he really wanted to go back. When my dad became ill, he thought it was a time that my mom would say, okay, we'll go back. And she was willing to go back for a little bit, but not to stay. So it made it very difficult in the sense that that was his dream, mm-hmm. to actually die at home. Mm-hmm. Because although he became a Canadian, he did not consider Canada his actual home. It was his borrowed home for a time. And then he was going to go back to his actual home. Mm-hmm. And my mother wanted to know about that because we were here. Mm-hmm. And for us, starting our own families, having our own relationships, we weren't ready to go back. And in hindsight, it would have been great to go back. But anyways.
Now you think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Melissa, what do you want to share about that? I mean, you've had some thoughts about going back at some point. What were how has that dream been for you? Or do you feel it's been a dream deferred to some ways, or it's just not meant to be now?
I don't think it's, it might have been a dream way back then, way back then when I didn't know any better. Or before I had children, I was going to go and I was going to stay for a period of time and then I'm going back home. But once I got settled here and had children of my own and became a Canadian citizen, then that became a second home. It's a place to go to visit those family members who choose to not leave the island. And so for me, the home became Ottawa because that's where my children are. I passed on to Joanne because I don't have that second or third family of culture living in my, I didn't have that intergenerational family. It was me and my children. And once they got to the stage where they had their own life, now it's my grandchildren. So now I'd love to go back home, which, and then there's, I can't because of the pandemic. But I think as I got older and children left home, then that's the time that I thought, it wasn't necessarily a dream, but it's a thought that, oh, I'd love to be at home on the beach, or, have a cottage and not having to deal with the cold temperature, because the older I get, the more I don't like the cold and the temperature in Ottawa.
But
like
Joanne,
right
sorry
now.
to cut you, but thank you for that, Melissa. But Joanne mentioned another reason that it may not occur for some folks as well, and it's with her dad becoming ill. And Melissa, you just touched on it too. As you get older, I know that there's some folks who think about things like, well, the healthcare system is better than elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so those are some key considerations as well. And you then make the choice to stay, even though the desire is still there, that you would like to be on the beach, you'd like to be pulling your fruits from the trees, that kind of thing.
That's right. And my mom died, and my parents have also passed. So I might have chosen back then to, if my parents were still alive, to probably, do that back then. But once they had passed and I had my own family here, it didn't become a dream anymore. It became a desire. It was a want, not so much a need.
Thank you. I want to go to a little deeper with the stresses, because while you guys have both shared some really fantastic strategies in terms of, kind of building personal relationships and then getting involved in community to be able to navigate both the cultural and social isolation, and then to also mitigate or manage this potential stress, whether it's being called names, whether it's being treated in a particular way, whether it's the fighting, whether it's the dream deferred. In one of the recent Mamawatali sessions, one community agency spoke about the rise of domestic violence due to the stress of COVID. Melissa, in your work, in your social work and community work, as well as your life coach business, how do you see gender-based violence, intimate partnership-based violence as a part of people's experiences, and particularly the migrant experiences, or the migration experience, I should say?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with how people came. In my case, I came as a landed immigrant. I made sure I had my landed immigrant status before I came, so that would give me a sense of independence later. There's some people who came as visitors, or some came as dependents, especially women who are older, the parents who might come to take care of children. Language is a big issue. I found language was a big issue, and the culture from where you came. So as I worked in the community in the West End, in the West End, I would do outreach in a community that was labeled the United Nations, because there's so many different people, many different cultures that are living in that area, in a low-income community. And as I would go and visit and knock on the door, ring the bell of these immigrant communities, which I didn't, they would not open the door. They would not acknowledge who is there, because some of them are told not to. So that is a space, a cause of like isolation, because they're told to be not to respond to anyone or not to leave the house. But as I start to leave, I could see the curtain at the top, like it shakes, so I know there was someone there. So therefore, you need to use a different approach in terms of connecting with who the people are, the leaders in the community that I could connect with. I recall visiting a family, and they served this. Boy, that is so ingrained in my mind. She served coffee, and it was this really thick, strong coffee in a small cup. When you go to visit, you don't just you don't start talking about problems or issues. You have to socialize first. Find out how people are doing, how are the children, like that. And so she served coffee, and I don't drink coffee. I never drink coffee. But in this instant, I drink the coffee, and I was sick after I left. But the point is, the intention was to be able to reach, to connect with this particular family. And as a result of that, I was able to go back, and then we would speak to some of the issues. And a lot of it had to do, as I say, with isolation, because being told you can't leave, and people believing that they can't leave, and also not having the knowledge about violence against women, that many of them who came from somewhere else, that is normal practice in where they came from, and not knowing that the rules here are different. So those are some of the issues that I dealt with in working in the broader community.
I just want to get to the space of of violence in particular and how that showed up in those families and situations.
It's hard to tell because they're so scared. They're not going to tell you that they're being abused. But someone next door or some other person in the community who knows that might share that information. So it was so important to make the connection between the leaders and other people in the community, who may then share some of what might be taking place.
So what I'm hearing you say is that there's somewhat of a code of silence, or a cone of silence that occurred around matters around gender-based violence or intimacy or intimate partner violence in many ways. So we didn't.
Yeah, a sense of fear. Yeah,
and the fear was there.
It's caused by there's fear in there, because you don't want to overstep, not do what your partner says, but also there is the broader context of isolation may come from the family as well, the extended family that of the partner or of the woman, that they could be isolated from their family if they take that outside of their home to share it with strangers.
Well, that's a really critical one you're talking about in terms of, whatever is our business stays within these walls. And
Yes.
if it goes out, then you're causing shame and then that's more harm. That's more room for further harm.
Yeah, you're ostracized you could be ostracized by your family, because they, especially if we're speaking about elders, if you're speaking about the older family members, the culture is different. So definitely what did you do?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the blame the victim mentality as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a very delicate issue, and you have to deal with it in a very delicate way through leaders in the community, some of whom were open to speaking to the issue, mm-hmm. and identifying ways of addressing it.
So you had to find ways of accessing those influencers within the community who were able to have those conversations.
Yes.
Okay, great. Joanne, you have a slightly different access point, and I specifically want to talk about the violence against seniors with you in this one, because you've continued the legacy of service to seniors in an organization that you've named after your mother, Flow Seniors. Tell us why you started Flow's network, and one of the things that I've noticed is the work against violence against seniors. And so if you can share with us in terms of what have you discovered and how you're supporting families in addressing these issues.
Okay, I started Flow Seniors because when my parents became ill, they didn't know how to navigate the system because they've always worked, paid their bills, paid their medical expenses. But as the expenses got higher, they were running out of money. So once they finally decided to tell me that they were ill, I was able to go into the system, and with the help of a nurse actually at the out of hospital, find the social worker, find ways for them to get their medication, find services through CCAC and so forth. So with doing that for them, I decided that, you know what, there's so many other people that don't know these things. And that's what started Flow Seniors. So we started off with just being information within the community, but we also help with finding programs, so reducing isolation, different programs that seniors can attend. We also got a grant dealing with elder abuse and awareness because people kept telling me that West Indians don't abuse their parents. But when you are yelling at your parent or grabbing your parent, that is still a form of abuse, and a lot of people don't recognize that. So it pushes us forward to get the word out that, like you would say, child abuse is grabbing your child and roughing them up and so forth. Well, it's the same thing with your parent. And a lot of people come, my parents are very old school. So if I came now and I'm being very disrespectful because I feel I'm taking care of you, that's a form of abuse as well. And a lot of people don't recognize that fact. And so when the parents start to become depressed or withdrawn, they're trying to figure out what has occurred because they figure they're living with me, I'm helping with food, clothing, whatever, but they're not realizing that their love relationship is what the problem is.
Mm-hmm. But there are other ways that senior abuse also shows up. I mean, there's the grabbing and those kinds of things. But then there are other things that I've seen in your communication around things like financial abuse in terms of forcing a family to sell or parents to sell property, et cetera. And most people, again, most people wouldn't think about those things in terms of or stealing money, pension checks, and those kinds of things. Those are other forms of abuse as well for seniors.
And we've had people tell us about that. I find that if you have a stranger, you're more willing to tell a stranger something that has occurred to you. So we used to go to a lot of different, well, when we could go out to a lot of different events and have the pamphlet that says elder abuse and awareness. And we've had people come up to us telling us their stories of, their children taking their money from their bank, putting them somewhere they don't want to be. And a lot of these people thought that those same children were the ones that would be good to them in their old age. But you don't, human nature, you just don't know. You can grow your kids up and think they're the finest people and something happens and they can't deal with it and they treat you in a very bad manner.
So what does your senior abuse program, how does that support seniors? Like, how do you inform them what they can do? Because it's one thing to say that this is what senior abuse looks like, but what are some of the next steps that you've supported folks in terms of taking, or how do you navigate them to move through that process?
So we've had various information sessions. We've tag teamed with different organizations. With Black History Ottawa did a whole series on fraud and how to deal with it and what it looks like. And what I do is I have a network that I reach out to. So depending on what it is that the person is asking about, I find the professionals that can help with that. I'm a good listener, yes, but I'm not that professional. So we have the professionals that can help. We had one gentleman where we end up giving him a bank manager's name. They were able to change his accounts so that he actually had money, because what was happening was that every time his check came in, his daughter was going to the bank and taking it. So we stopped that, and he was able to get mechanisms from social workers on how to deal with the anger that his daughter would have when she found out that she could no longer just take his money.
And it's interesting because, again, now that you're in your wisdom years, as I call it, you're now in a situation where it's another type, the social isolation continues in a different way. Because the social isolation may now be with family members, as you said, that, you thought this is the one that's going to take care of me. And how do that's incredible vulnerability.
It is. And there are a lot of people that are on their own and are isolated and are lonely. And those are the people that we actually look for so that we can introduce them to the various programs that are going on in the community, the phone calls that are being made. Every day, somebody is calling someone to see, how are you doing? What do you need? Where do you want to go from here? Here are some programs that are going on. Even seniors that would not deal with computers now have iPads, and the ones that still don't want to have the iPads, we now have phone calls. So they know somebody's going to be calling them, someone's going to be talking to them. We were lucky enough to get a grant from Red Cross and City of Ottawa, and we were able to even drop off baskets at the nursing homes. I didn't realize we had so many Black seniors in nursing homes. So we were able to drop off baskets and call them, did you get your basket? Get the appreciation, and people in their homes as well. So it's now, we have to be that village. It's no longer about raising the children. It's about being the village for our seniors as well.
Supporting them. And it's interesting what you just said. You didn't know that there were so many seniors in nursing home, because in terms of that back home space,
that's right.
Nursing homes, even though it's starting to happen more and more, it's still not the norm, so to speak. So it is, again, for those isolated singles or isolated individuals, or maybe someone who got sick for whatever reason.
That's right.
There are different reasons why you may be in a nursing home. So how do you find out about where people are or who's in need? I mean, so nursing homes is one channel, but are there other channels that you find out who's in need?
So usually it's word of mouth. Because after you start talking about what you do, people start phoning and telling you, okay, did you know so-and-so and this and this? And our community is very good for that.
Wonderful.
So it's great in that session.
Oh, I love to hear that, because, the one thing I don't like is to hear people are in isolation and living alone, especially in your elder years, because so many things can happen, particularly within the weather or during this COVID time.
That's right.
It's so critical. I want to just shift gears a little bit and let's talk about COVID, because that's another way that things have shown up in ways, kind of the twin pandemic of COVID and anti-Black racism has kind of resulted in disproportionate impact on ABC communities and seniors. And Melissa, I'm wondering, what cultural strategies are you using to navigate COVID? And Joanne, what are you learning from the Seniors in Flows network as they navigate COVID? So Melissa, what cultural strategies are you using to navigate COVID?
I'm not sure that I'm using, I have any specific cultural strategies. I think basically for me, my support are my family, my children, and I'm fortunate that both of them live in Ottawa now, but they also have families of their own. So I think I was really interested in hearing the question you asked, Joanne, in terms of how do you find these isolated people? Because I know people, but I might be coming from the space of, I don't want people knowing my business, so I don't want them to know that I'm isolated, So I might not reach out. So for me, it's my family, but I also find that I love my own company, and I like. I don't mind being alone, but during this pandemic time, it's the loneliness, and there's a distinct difference between being alone and being lonely. And the loneliness can drive you absolutely crazy, because sometimes I could be in this house of mine for weeks, days, months at a time without having any contact with an adult. Because if my children are busy and they're not able to drop in, there is that I just don't know how to describe that sense of loneliness that I experience. And so it have me thinking about some of those other seniors who are single, living alone, and are not in a home. And for me, the thing about us being told everybody's staying is encouraged to stay alone and protect themselves for the sake of our health. But our health are being affected by that isolation and loneliness. And so that's one of the things that I find the most challenging. And I'm not sure there is a cultural strategy to deal with that. I tap into the resources that are often available to me. I haven't spent so much time on Zoom as I've spent. I mean,
Zoom and Google are your friends.
My best friends are now on Zoom. So when I get into that lonely space, I connect with someone on Zoom or with a group. That's the only way of connecting with groups of people. It's with Zoom, and and I connect with my friends as well on the phone. But it's just it's quite amazing that loneliness piece. I can't emphasize that enough. How
I want to carry that through with Joanne a little bit, because I think you've touched on a particular thing there. Joanne, in terms of what are you learning from the series in Flows Network, and how much does loneliness play a part in this, particularly during this period of COVID?
So loneliness plays a very big part. The most that we've heard in even phone calls that we've made to seniors is they're lonely, but we've had some people that are lonely to the point that they're anxious and they need some social interaction, which is great that they reach out and they call people that are connected to them. It helps for that moment. The thing that always worries me is what happens after that moment. Mm-hmm. There's only so many books you can read, only so many phone calls you can make. But a lot of the seniors are saying that the different programs that are going on now is what helps them to get through. So you have programs that are during the day. We're now bringing programs into the evening. There's programs starting on weekends because...
What type of programs are you during these different times?
At the Bronson Center, I connect with, it's called Bronson Open Door. You can't open the door right now, but... Mm-hmm. 5 days a week, there's a program going on. There's either yoga, there's a session of what we had was Jamal Jackson came, spoke with the group, those type of programs. Jack Kukombe has program during the week as well. The Good Companion Center has programs. So what I like to try to do is I line up all the different programs, try to get it on my website, but also get it out by word of mouth. So you have the option of what program you would like to go into. And what I'm finding is that people are now meeting friends on programs. Mm-hmm. So, long time no see. Let's connect.
Wow. Oh, I love that. So you've become this amazing connector for them as well, to support them in terms of not only friendships, but also communities again.
Yes, because as a whole, we all have to try to be as one. If someone has a program, to me, we should be sharing with everyone so that they have that choice as to what they'd like to do, who they'd like to see.
Mm-hmm. And during COVID, are you hearing anything specific from them? I mean, loneliness is one of them, but are you hearing other things from them as well that they're concerned about?
Well, the most I've heard is the loneliness. A lot of the seniors are now venturing out to do their banking, to do their groceries, to do their whatever. Mm-hmm. Before, when it first hit, a lot of seniors are trying to see how much food do I have that I can make it through in my cupboard, or like Melissa was saying, I don't want to talk to you because one of the things is that, we look the same, but you're not going to have my business out there. Mm-hmm. And so one of the first things we say is, what you tell us stays with us. Mm-hmm. What you want to share is share. And I'm like that too. I don't want everybody to know my business. So I try to respect that privacy of somebody else. But we try then to call that person more often than not if that's a person that doesn't have a lot of supports.
Great. Thank you so much. Can you just share with people your website so they can know how to get in touch with Flows Network if they want to be involved in supporting the seniors in terms of whether calling them or letting you know about programs that they know about?
Sure. It's www.flowseniors.ca.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah,
I think that's just so great. Melissa, I want to come back to you and just ask you a closing question around how important is it for your children and grandchildren to know about your roots and culture? Why is that important to you?
I think it's continuing the what I call the legacy. And for me, it's not only with me, but it's also with the extended family. So one of the things that I started this year to do with one of my nephews is we started having Zoom video conversations during the pandemic. And so we would invite put it out there, and different members would join us. And we were having this different times of based on people's availability. So we had people participating from Jamaica. We have people participating from China. There's people participating in the US. There's people participating in the UK. So this kind of brought the extended family together in having these conversations around what is occurring for them during this period. And also one of the other things that it highlighted for us is the similarities because it's different generations. So it's my children and my children or nephews and nieces who have children. So it's kind of like,
I like it.
So it's two kind of life of its own. And then there would be a nephew or a couple of nephews who are DJs. And one Saturday afternoon, they would have DJ music, and they would, having that. And then they would have someone who have a birthday party, and there would be that celebration. So I'd put the link on, and it was it's just kind of like the connection continued. So I guess this kind of answered the question that you asked me before as well, in terms of what kind of cultural links I'm making. That this is one of the ways that I'm staying in touch with the extended family and getting to know some of the younger generation that I hadn't been in touch with before, and them being in touch with me and learning from me as well. I just completed a 9-week coaching session with a niece who was looking at extending her self-development in terms of where she wants to go as a young woman, and that was just fabulous. So it's kind of just have expanded and taken on a life of its own, and have kept me busy, but it's also have extended that legacy, so to speak, in terms of the importance of having that dialogue. So now we have one other niece who would form a family tree, and each member from my generation would then have a branch, and then link the people in your family for the children and grandchildren. And so we have this small thing that has just taken on a life of its own. And it's just
I love how all the things that we would do face-to-face, or try to plan face-to-face, the family reunion, the liming sessions, the dance parties, we're doing it by Zoom and Google Meet now. So I think it's pretty exciting stuff. I love it. And your coaching session with your nieces, I think it's beautiful. Joanne,
like it.
I'm curious. Oh yeah, I mean, it's a great thing. That's been going on in my family as well. We've been able to do family reunion that we've not been able to do physically. So there goes. But Joanne, I'm curious.
about what cultural practices or ways that you learned from your parents that you have instilled in your children, and how important it is for your children and grandchildren to continue acknowledging and celebrating their bicultural heritage, that Jamaican Canadian heritage.
So, although we were here, we were raised strictly Jamaican. There was no Canadian about it.
Like it's just geography.
It was just, yeah, exactly. And I found that I raised my children in the same manner. Mm-hmm. And now that they're older, they're young men, I find that they have adopted a lot of those same cultures, which I think is fantastic, because you don't want to, if it's not broken, don't change it. And I totally agree with, like, my father was very strict. And as I became an adult, I understood why. With our children, we were strict, but not as strict as my parents would be, because back in that time, you're more seen, not heard. I'm not really, really old, but in that case, with my guys, as long as it was respectful, you could bring the conversation, any conversation. Mm-hmm. And so we've continued that on. And I have to say, talking about a village, my website is not .ca, it's .com. I got a text to tell me it's .com.
See, helping mom with the program. I love it. Joanne, I just want to go back. There was a question in the Q&A that I just want to wrap up with you. Joanne, your children, trying to fit in, or children and trying to fit in might take a change of clothes, for example, to school. Did you ever take a change of clothes? And
yes.
What did you do? What did you do with those beautiful ribbons?
Those beautiful ribbons ended up in my little school bag, because even if they got ripped off, they had to come back home one way or the other. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much, ladies. If there are any other questions that participants would like to ask, please put it in chat, and then we'll be able to pass that on as well. Melissa or Joanne, any final comments you want to share with our listeners?
For myself, I was really nervous about this forum, but I'm having such a great time. And I think
conversation, baby.
It is. And it's such a good way to connect and to remember where you're coming from. Mm-hmm. Some of my stories I hadn't remembered in such a long time, because when you move forward, you tend to leave those things behind, but some of those things behind is what makes you better as you move forward.
Did we really live it beyond or become so integrated with us that we don't even recognize when we're tapping into it? Because if I think about the cultural foundation as almost like a tool belt that I have around my waist, it's like, oh, let me bring this out. Let me bring the humor out. Me bring, the memories out. Let me bring this out. Because so it's like we tap into them when we need them, but we may not need them every single moment of every single day, but they're there for us to tap into. The music is one, the food is another. All of these things we plug into.
I totally agree with that, because unlike Joanne, I did not raise my children as either Canadian or Jamaican. I gave them both. And so my oldest son, not so long ago, when he had his son, he was asking me to tell some stories about my upbringing. And what he did was he took that story and he changed it and make it appropriate for Julian. And later he said to me, I know that when I was growing up, sometimes you think that I'm not hearing what you're saying. But I was hearing what you're saying, because now it's becoming helpful for me in raising my own son. Mm-hmm. So I do agree that these cultural pieces, and like at Christmas time, they always want their ackee and saltfish and they fry Johnny cake, so that is always, and the cereal. So where's the cereal now? Like those traditions, some of those traditions is ongoing and continuing. So I think it seemed like small things, but they're really they're quite important. But the other piece that I wanted to put in here is that the role of a grandmother. You know, in Jamaica, we had that extended family, so the role of a grandmother would be part of that integral part of the family. In this new generation of parenting, it is different. There's visits with grandma, and there's different that togetherness piece, like that intergenerational coming together of cultures, has changed. So it's happening in a different way depending on the family.
And I think it's, even though it's happening in a different way, it's how do you feel a sense of honor of that still?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, every Saturday morning, I know that I'm going to see Tyson as long as he's not sick. So, but because he's in daycare now, so I don't see him during the week. But I know that I can look forward to seeing him on Saturday morning for, maybe an hour, a couple of hours, as long as he can tolerate it, because, he's a toddler moving around. But yeah, it is very important and essential for me.
So here's a good question for a parenting question. Did your children try stripsing at your mother when they were upset, or you as parents when they were upset? And what were your mother's reaction, or what were your reaction?
Stripsing? What's
stripsing?
That?
Like talking back, or yeah, I would say talking back is perhaps the closest thing, or when they do something like that kind of thing.
So what we would call being fresh?
Being fresh.
Try being fresh. Kids were being fresh. They said, what did he say? It's a new time. It's a new day, ma. It's not like back then. Of course they tried.
They tried.
But yeah, they tried.
But they were schooled that this was not acceptable.
Oh, they got the look.
Oh yes, sucking the teeth. Yes, not acceptable behavior.
Not at all.
Well, I just really want to thank you so much for this conversation, for sharing your journey, for sharing your wisdom, and for sharing what you continue to do in our communities to serve and to listen and to be a guide around, to really minimize social isolation, as well as to really hear where people are and meeting them where they are in terms of their need. And so, as I said, thank you for just sharing who you are, Ms. Melissa Rowe, Joanne Robinson, in this conversation on navigating relationships between ABC seniors and their Canadian children.
Thank you for being such a great facilitator, for continuing the conversation. It was very it was done with ease.
Very true. Very true.
Well, we do try. So thank you so much for that. So please spread the word. Join the social media campaign with Facebook, IG, Instagram, that is, Twitter, YouTube channel, and LinkedIn. Definitely get that information. And the contact and email that you can reach Mamawati is info@MAAMAWATALI, Mamawatali.org, or mail at P.O. Box 53124, Rideau Center, RO. It has been a pleasure being with you this afternoon. Special thanks to the Government of Canada through Employment and Social Development Canada funding administered by the Canadian Red Cross for funding for this series of conversations.